All right, let's move on to things that we can actually smile about, which would be the Week 7 matchups, because we got a really interesting week. Some teams that we don't normally see coming into the area to play some games, and then Snider heading over west to play another big game for them. Let's start in the NHC, though, because Carroll Homestead is always one of the trademark games in the NHC, at least in the last couple of years, and this is somewhat of an elimination game, essentially, for Homestead. They got to win this one if they want to compete with New Haven for the championship.
Yeah, Homestead's already got a loss. They were upset by Belmont. Carroll's got 2 losses. So this is a critical game for Homestead with New Haven being undefeated. I mean, they're in the driver's seat as they've got to be enjoying that view.
Yeah.
But Homestead has to win this game to stay alive, because you get 2 losses this late in the season. You really think that no one catches New Haven at that point.
Now, I remember you were at the Carroll-Norwell game a few weeks ago where they put up 70 on the Knights. But to think that Carroll, as good as they are and what they started this season like, to end up at this point with 3 losses in conference, that kind of be mind-boggling? Or does that tell you how good the NHC is this year, at least in the top half?
I would be surprised if to look at them at this point in the season, if they were to get beat by Homestead, to have 3 losses. That's a surprise, because I think they have a lot of talent. Obviously, the Tranquil brothers are the top of the list of that talent, but it was a surprise to see that they had a second loss, losing to East Noble. I think they bounced back pretty heavily last week, and I would think that Homestead's going to get Carroll's very best game this Friday night.
Yeah, and Homestead averaging 29 points a game. A lot of teams would kill for that. For Coach Zolman, that's a low end. Although Logan Ormsby has done a nice job, and the Skronik receiver, Kreider, they've got a lot of weapons.
And getting upset by Belmont probably sparked them a little bit too. This game may not feature a conference winner, because I think New Haven's clearly got the path to win it, but I think it should be a good game. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the SAC. This game had a little bit more juice until Wayne took the sock out of Dwenger. But Indianapolis Cathedral coming to Bishop Dwenger, a statewide contest that is going to have a lot of eyes on it. What do you see as the biggest key in this one? Because obviously the Saints are looking to bounce back. And Cathedral, you look at their record, they're 2-4. But they haven't played a typical high school schedule. They've gone across state lines multiple times to play this year.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their schedule and the teams they've played, and I think they're all teams with winning records, and they're all teams that have powerful programs. So, 2-4 doesn't really mean what 2-4 might mean if it was a different conference situation. As you mentioned before, Dwenger's got to be really working hard this week to rectify and figure out what was wrong with their performance a week ago. This is a kind of a game that's always got a little bit of extra to it, because they're 2 powerful programs, have been to state championship games multiple times, and so Dwenger's got to right their ship. I think they've got to go back to where they're grinding it out and getting yardage and not allowing those big plays, which Wayne obviously exploited on them.
And this game was a 42-7 win at Cathedral last year. Between that and the Wayne game, if you don't have a lot of juice as a Saints player this week, if you're not eager to get on the field and rectify some of the doubters, boy, you better just hang it all up, because this is a game where you really want to get out there and show them what they've got. Yeah. If they could play this game today, I think Bishop Dwenger would do that. I'm
pretty sure if they were practice today, they would prefer to be playing a game instead of a practice.
Absolutely. Snider goes on the road. A couple weeks ago, they go to Penn. They lose 38-0. Penn may be the best 6A team in the state, so I don't know how much you can read into that. But they're playing an Elkhart Central team that's 2-4 this week, and Snider's had some games that have been closer than we would have thought in the last couple of weeks.
Right.
The loss to Northside, I don't know if you consider that an upset, and then a 1-point win against Concordia.
Yeah.
What do they have to do to right the ship heading into a big road game like this?
Well, at this point in the season, there's not a lot of new things you can do. Usually your team has kind of figured out where they are, what their strengths are, so you have to play to those. And I think what Coach Tittman will have to do is get his team together, show them what didn't go well in the last game, which I'm sure this is common of all teams. You look at what you did wrong. But I think it's basically getting back to what they've done well when they've been winning. You don't change a lot of things at this point when we're going into this, the home stretch of the regular season.
And I think one of the things that's been surprising is, last year they had the 3-headed monster running back. Roy, Bramley have done a nice job this year, but they've only put up about 9 points a game over the last 3 games. something they're definitely going to have to do to win on the road in a trip that's going to take you about an hour and 45 minutes to get there.
Yeah, and you go back to regular SAC football, it's where is that one at? It's at the line of scrimmage. So Snyder's got to get their line of scrimmage, their trenches operating the way they want it to, grinding out some yardage, and also not allowing people to run on them.
And that's always been a strength of the Snyder team.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Kurt Tippmann will get that righted. Here's a huge game. It's going to be our Highlight Zone game of the week. It's going to go a long way in deciding the ACAC championship. It's Leo and Woodland. The game is going to be at Lions Field. And I think at the beginning of the season you would have said these two are probably the best teams in the ACAC. That has more or less played out. Heritage has a claim to that as well. But what do you see as being the big key Friday night at Lions Field?
Well, the key as far as Woodland goes is not letting Leo strike quick and early and fast and build up a 21-point lead. I think that's a key. If Woodland can score early, make it a game where you go into halftime and it's 14-7, or maybe it's 20-14, or what. It's a game at halftime. Then it's a different situation. One thing I like about Woodland is that Sherwood Haydock has always been a good coach when his teams are considered to be underdogs or have people count them out. He finds ways to make things happen. He did that at Harding. Is starting to establish what he wants at Woodland here as he's building that program. So Leo's a better team. But if Woodland can hang and be there, then who knows what can happen, as we found out last week.
Yeah, and I think I read a quote in your paper from Coach Haydock saying this is going to be a really good test to see. They're playing a good 4A team, a ranked 4A team, to see how they're going to fare when they get into 2A in the playoffs. Lures no longer in 2A.
Right.
Woodland can go a long way. Jalen Bennett, there are not a lot of 6'4", 220-pound running backs when it comes to 2A football.
Yeah, he's the real deal when it comes to any level. Really, I think he's shown that he could play at just about any class in Indiana. But to be at 2A and have a running back that size, that speed, that power, reminds me of other backs that have been successful in 2A. Speaking of lures, and some of the players that they've had were successful.
And I believe I lifted this stat from your paper too. Leo's only given up 37 points this season. As much as we talk about the offense, you got Leiter, you've got Hissong, you've got a lot of weapons there. Boy, it all comes down to defense winning championships, and that defense against Jalen Bennett and Greg White and Corbin Smith, that's going to be a good one this Friday.
Yeah, and I think what Leo does well defensively is that they don't allow teams to get those big plays on them. In fact, they're often very opportunistic defensively in getting interceptions, forcing fumbles, that sort of thing. So, Leo definitely has a complete team. Offense always gets more headlines, so to speak, but defensively they've been very, very tough.
Speaking of tough defenses, again, we always talk about the offense with Churubusco. Seems like they win 49-0 every week. The defense has been really good this season, but it's going to be really tested against Culver Academy at home this coming Friday. This is a game where Culver beat them pretty handily last year, 35-16. Of course, that was on the road for Churubusco. Busco 6-0, but they've only played conference teams so far. So this is going to be their biggest test of the season in many respects. What do you see as being the big key Friday night at Churubusco?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Culver, I was, in coming on the show, I was kind of looking at what their scores had been. They've had some quality opponents, tougher schedule than Churubusco has had, I guess it would be a good way to phrase it. And they have a win, I think, over Lafayette Central Catholic, don't they? Yeah. So that's always a program that if you're gonna measure yourself, that's a good one to measure, especially for a 2A school like Busco. Clearly, you want to not let Culver play with the lead. You don't want Culver to play with the lead or to play with a couple touchdown leads. I just think Busco will need to grind it out, which is what they can do well. They'll need to control the running game and maybe use that clock to their advantage offensively. And
I think Busco, at times they'll come out like gangbusters, and at times, like the East Side game, they're down early. They can't afford that against a good Culver Academy's team.
Yeah, the good thing about Churubusco is that over the past few years that they've been so good and have went to the playoffs and run into lures or whatever, that they're used to playing against tough competition in the playoff situation. Maybe their schedule for the most part isn't as tough as, say, obviously not as tough as the Lures would play in the SAC, but they've been used to playing that quality of competition. So I don't think Culver will, being pretty strong, will intimidate them that way.
I think it'll be really interesting to see how Churubusco does in the playoffs, because for so many years they've had really good teams, but they've always had to get past Lures, and that's been such a sticking point. It'll be interesting to see what a Woodland, what a Churubusco can do in the playoffs without a roadblock, a state championship contender.
Two ways going to be fascinating this year. I really think, because especially for us in this part of the state, without Lures in that mix, everyone who has a good two-way program is thinking, this is our chance. We want to make sure we take advantage of the situation. So it's going to be fun to see, yeah.
Anything else that you're looking forward to most about Week 6 that we haven't covered? I think we covered pretty much everything, but anything else that you're looking forward to quite a bit?
You know what? It's just this point of the season where I think teams that maybe started slow can gather steam towards the playoffs. Teams that started fast and maybe have fallen off need to regroup in a hurry. Because I've talked to numerous coaches, and the one thing they'll always say is, we'd like to be playing our best week 10 when you start the sectional. You love those conference championships, but you want to be playing well when the sectional starts, and you can move down in the playoffs and see how deep you can go. We had great examples of that, a year ago, Heritage going on a nice run in the postseason, things like that. So looking forward to seeing which teams really pick up steam as we go towards the playoffs, and they're coming faster than we expect.
It is. We are 2/3 of the way through the regular season. We'll be more than that by this coming Friday. Reggie Hayes, we definitely appreciate the analysis. He's from the News Sentinel. They'll have you covered all week long leading up to a big Friday night. And, of course, we'll have you covered on the Highlight Zone. For Reggie, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next Monday.